Welcome to the Only Weird Games Super Bowl 59 extravaganza. Nate Taylor is in the middle of a 3-ring circus known as Radio Row. Seth Keysor is fresh back from a tropical vacation. And I have to try to get both of them to talk about a football game. Let's ride.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
Now, at this exact moment, Nate is more literally lost in the labyrinth of Radio Row than I anticipated as I was thinking about what the cold open may be for us here today. I am Joshua Brisco, stationed right here in good old KC, Missouri, as Seth Keysor, just the two of us right now, while we hope that Nate can find some sort of home, some sort of availability to do this podcast. It's been a long week for him. It's still only Thursday. I think it's been a pretty short week for you. You've been putting your feet in sand, touching some grass, looking at the sun, and letting these complaints of football adjacent nonsense just roll off the back like the duck you are.
It's been fantastic. I saw shout out to Greg Slayton in the comments asking how I got away with taking a vacation during Super Bowl week. I do what I want, Greg.
Be here.
Yeah. No, I knew they would be. That's one reason Jazz scheduled it when she did. Because it was like, oh, well, that'll be, kind of a week in between. So one of the great things about being mostly your own boss in this field is you can just write stuff, and flying Delta, you can just write something on the flight. And that's what I did. And after taking a few days to really get some Cancun perspective, thank you for everyone that asked. I did not run into any members of the Bills or Texans or Bengals.
Tough for all of those teams to once again not show up when you were expecting them.
Yeah, no, it was a little disconcerting, a little disheartening, but then I realized at the end of the day, some people just aren't built for the moment, and they see those big waves and they get a little scared. And no, I had a lot of fun, and it was just wonderful to get away. Blue skies, blue water. I got to parasail and jet ski, and I did a couple other things that were super active, but I can't remember what they were at this point because my wife's idea of a vacation is to get out and do things. And I'm like, yeah, but what if, and hear me out, we just sat here instead? Huh? And so she wanted to get out and do things, and I wanted to sit around and do nothing. So we compromised and got out and did things. And that's kind of similar to how we ended up with 5 kids, honestly. That's, so life is good. And it gave me a whole new perspective on the commentary around the Chiefs, which has finally, after a ridiculous amount of refs, rigged, stupid questions, I think the stupidity of Super Bowl week coverage actually managed to cleanse the timeline of some of that, because some of the morons that are allowed press passes during Super Bowl week and are allowed to ask just the dumbest crap. And I think some of that finally got to everyone. And they're like, okay, that's what I sound like when I say the Chiefs, have it rigged or whatever. And so it just gave me a whole new perspective on everything. I'm just excited to talk ball. And yeah, life is good, my friend. It's good to see you, though. You guys did a great job while I was away. A little little risque. Can't say I.
But Seth, can you please confirm from your evangelical perspective that for once again, I was not the problem?
Oh yes, 1,000,000%. Allow me to absolve you from my position of moral superiority. To note that you. There's like a 1% part that might be put on you, but maybe even then it's like, look, Nate and here's the thing, I actually had some people ask me like, man, the show gets a little out of hand when you're not there, and I'm like, I love that you think I could have changed that.
That's how I feel too. Well, just to be fair, there's people like, Josh, you really got to get the show under the control. Who are you talking to?
Yeah, it's okay.
I'll extend a previous shout out and also break some news to you here directly, Seth, and then we'll get into some actual serious football talk. I saw Iced Pyro was recognizing the first official voyage of a shirt that I am wearing now. Nate Taylor got one of these at training camp this year from Iced Pyro. 'Tis a silly sport where the ball is not round.
That's amazing.
This is the maiden voyage of this shirt. I feel like Super Bowl week, final Only Weird Games episode. I am happy to put this out into the world, and at some point, I don't know if Ice Pyro has some like rights issues to deal with or not, but I feel like he should just be selling these if he feels like it. But Seth, you know what I have?
What do you have?
A second shirt for you.
Is that for me? No way.
This is for you. It is a medium, which I told Ice Pyro I thought would probably be your best fit. That's not true. It is your shirt. It is not a medium. And the next time that you are in town, you can tase me as I hand you the shirt, and we'll officially be settled on our bets.
I still have to, and that's this off season probably do the ghost pepper thing because it's just we've had enough.
We'll figure it out. I'm ready.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. I still, and I've told everyone, I almost brought that taser with me for the live show just to take you by surprise with it. And you have no idea how close you came to being actually physically assaulted live. And I just could not bring myself to do it. I was like, that would bother me if you did it to me. And I was like, this is not going to push it too far. So, but no, that's so exciting. Thank you, Ice Pyro. You are one of the consistently funniest commenters we have. We appreciate that you're here basically every show. And it's so kind. Seriously, there's so many commenters that are here every week that kind of share the experience with us. Those of you that listen to the podcast, because I listened to the podcast a couple times, you do miss out by not watching live and watching the chaos that comes in the comments. Because honestly, the things you're hearing us say, and you're like, man, this show is weird. And we're like 15% as weird as the commenters. And I mean that in the most complimentary way possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I honestly, like, people have asked about me taking time off during Super Bowl week, and I'm like, oh, is it that time of year again? How interesting. And that's the attitude that I have started bringing to all of this. And who knows what'll happen with the Chiefs. What I do know is this is the 5th time they've been here in 6 years. That's so crazy. And so I have taken the stance. I'm ready to be arrogant. I'm ready to be like, oh yeah, we're back here. It's really cool. And I'll be really nervous once the game starts and the Eagles are a good team and who knows what might happen. But yeah, it's that time of year again. I'm writing Keys to the Super Bowl, Part 1, again. And tomorrow or the next day, I'm going to write Keys to the Super Bowl, Part 2, again. Just like I did last year and the year before, and just like I did last year, the year before. We got to talk about this is the best team the Chiefs have ever faced, which is apparently a thing with the Eagles. And maybe it is. Who knows? I mean, statistically, they're not, but maybe. And so it's so wonderful to experience Groundhog's Day with our Groundhog's Day experience being, and once again, the Chiefs are back in the Super Bowl. Like, that would be our 6 a.m. wake up call is, you can doubt the Chiefs. You can, like, it would be in the middle of that, right? And that's what would wake us up at 6 a.m.
Do you know when the Chiefs won the first Super Bowl of this era against the San Francisco 49ers?
Something 2020.
February 2nd, 2020.
No!
Put your little hand in mine. 100%. 100%. Take that.
That's awesome.
Nose Ned. We watch Groundhog's Day every Groundhog's Day now, and
oh sure,
it is all very, very fresh.
Ned
the head,
Ryerson. Come on, needle nose Ned the head. No, that is classic stuff, man. That guy was so good at being punchable. Good for him.
So good, man. I just as you were winding up to say that, I was winding up to fake a punch. It's one of the most satisfying moments in all of cinema. Is needle nose Ned the head. Get poof.
It's just even the way he does it. It's Ned Ryerson. It's like, man, you just want to sell him insurance. And that joke becomes much funnier as you get older. And you're like, oh, That's why you're like the friend I haven't talked to since high school, but has an MLM company now. Shout out to my wife, Jazz, who has done MLM stuff and does a great job with it. And honestly, her companies are different and better. But
interesting.
At times, you hear from somebody you haven't heard from in like 10 years. Hey, how you doing? Oh, man, good. How are you? Great. Hey, lately I've been a lot better because I'm working from home for twice the salary that I used to make. And you're like, wait a minute, what's happening here?
Yeah.
And also, that sounds intriguing. So...
Yeah. Well, listen, if anybody's done a good job of climbing to the top of the pyramid, it's been the Kansas City Chiefs. And so, in this instance, Seth, as Nate tries to find a working outlet or whatever exactly he's going to do, I want to settle into your most recent piece in a little bit about the Chiefs offense and some specific matchups you're looking at. But yeah, we've kind of begun the vibe check here now, where we don't have a dedicated like keys to the Chiefs defense thing. So I'm leaving this pretty open-ended outside of the offense that we'll get more specific about in a little bit.
Okay.
We're here now, a few days away from the Chiefs' chance to win 3 consecutive Super Bowls, the third, obviously, appearance in 3 consecutive years.
Straight Super Bowls.
Everything about it is ridiculous on 100 different levels. But where are you right now? If it's something about the Eagles that doesn't smell quite right, maybe it's in the best team the Chiefs have ever faced in the Super Bowl conversation. Something where you've either found or lost some confidence in what the Chiefs are bringing here. A matchup that you haven't heard enough discussion about. What's the feel for you right now? It did sound like you're a little bit skeptical of this idea that the Eagles are an unstoppable juggernaut.
The thing that's making the rounds right now is how good the Eagles' defense and offense both are. And I understand. I think there's a little bit of recency bias going on here, though. They blew out the Commanders in the NFC Championship. I would just ask you, had someone told you a month ago that the Eagles blew out the Washington Commanders, would you be like, wow, that's incredible. That's demonstrative that they're an incredible contender. Well, no, the Commanders made it farther than they were supposed to. Right. And then also, I would maybe ask you, wow, how'd that happen? They must have really dominated Jaden Daniels and really, they didn't move the ball well on him at all. No, they fumbled like 4 times and the Eagles recovered all of them.
Yeah.
And that's just...
They did beat the Rams by 6 points. I can't remember exactly how that.
And the Rams moved the ball well too.
They really did.
And so here's the big thing. Friend of the show, which is he's actually a colleague. My friend of the show, Kent Swanson, lifelong mortal enemy of Josh Brisco. Even before they knew each other, they were enemies. They just hadn't met yet.
Yeah, I wanted to be the best holder in MNU football history, and I had such a legacy to overcome.
Oh, that's so funny. So he tweeted out something that Andrew Brandt wrote. I predict Mahomes will have one of the worst games of his career. Now, he did say this is a bold prediction. It won't just be a subpar game. It will be a downright poor game. I'm not sure he's seen a defensive line like the one the Eagles have. So here's the interesting question I have here. I'm trying to figure out the 2022 Eagles defensive line. Mm-hmm. Had Hassan Reddick, Josh Sweat, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, a better version of Brandon Graham by quite a ways, and Justin Hargrave. Their top...
Was Ndamukong Suh on that team?
No, he was on the Bucks a couple years earlier. No, you know what? Sue was. Linval Joseph was, and Ndamukong Suh was. But they weren't... I named the top...
Not fair. Yeah. Totally fair for you to
named
their
top
5 guys. Absolutely.
Those were their top 5 guys in quarterback pressures per PFR. Cool. Reddick had 41 that year. Sweat had 27. Cox had 25. Graham had 21. Hargrave had 18. 2024, their number 1 pressure getter this year is Jalen Carter with 23. That's less than Reddick, less than Sweat, less than Cox, and 2 more than Graham in 2022. After that is Sweat with 16, Smith with 15, Milton Williams with 12, Brandon Graham with 11. Here's the deal. The Eagles have a good defense. They have all year. But like this idea that like, well, this is the best D-line. Like, am I the only one that watched last year's Super Bowl? Or like the Super Bowl the year before? Or the Bucs Super Bowl? Good Lord. Or the first time they played the Niners? Like, I just really don't understand that. And I think recency bias has really come a long ways. Now, am I saying the Chiefs are guaranteed to win? No, absolutely not. But I do think people are forgetting early in the season when the Eagles looked a certain way. And hey, they're a very different team now.
I fully had them on fraud watch like the first 8 weeks or something of the season. No question. I did not think of them in this category until the back half of the year.
Yeah, and they've played well in the playoffs. They've obviously made it to the Super Bowl. They're a really good team. But the idea that they're like this historic roster, I'm not quite sure about. And who knows? Maybe they do blow out the Chiefs. Who knows? And then if that happens, I'll say, wow, holy crap, was I wrong? But I would just say that's one thing that as I've looked into this, I don't think that the hype for that front four matches their production on the year. Yeah. Doesn't mean they're not good. They are good. It doesn't mean they won't mess up the Chiefs' game plan. They very well might. They're a good defense. But this idea that they've been like this consistently game-wrecking front four is not statistically accurate. And they have not wrecked games. And in fact, if you look at the NFC Championship, yeah, they blew them out. But again, that wasn't really because they were destroying the Commanders' protection. That was turnovers, lots and lots of them.
I think it goes hand in hand with, and I know I've already cut myself off from getting this topic until we fully dive into the Chiefs offense, but I think what's happening there on some level is that there are a lot of paths for the Eagles to win this game. Just to make that evidently clear. Lots of paths. If they play this game 10 times, the Eagles are winning it at least 3, right? Like 3 or 4 maybe, and if they win it 5 times, it's a toss-up. This is a real football game between two competitive football teams. But I think that almost all of the Eagles' paths to winning starts with Saquon Barkley and the defensive line.
Yep.
I think that let's say again they win 4 of 10 if they play this game 10 times. I think in all 4 of those games, the Chiefs or the Eagles pass rush has overwhelmed the Chiefs offensive line, which we're going to talk about later, and decide which side of the coin we're on that. And I think Saquon not only has a big day, he has an explosive day. We talked about this a little bit in the last few shows, but like I'm not worried about even 4 yards to carry. Hey, 4 yards to carry, every carry gets you first down every time. Not really how that ends up working out in practicality. If Saquon has a bunch of long runs, that's a huge red flag for how this game ends up going for the Chiefs.
Right.
But I think that in the sort of, I think the recency bias and wanting to, not even if you're not picking the Eagles, because I've been talking about the Eagles D-line all week too. Mm-hmm. I think even if you're not picking the Eagles, you almost want to circle in on the pass rush because you know it's one of the question marks for Kansas City. It should be an advantage that Philadelphia has matchup-wise. And then you start overstating things as you go, and you amp it up more and more as the week goes on. You get more and more confident in that as you decide you are going to pick the Eagles. I kind of think that's where that evolution has come from like good defensive line to the best defensive line Patrick Mahomes has ever even heard of.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing is like this Eagles roster, because they're better coached on the defensive side of the ball, might be a better overall unit than that from 2 years ago. They were vastly reliant on pass rush there. They've got better corners, even though a couple of them are rookies, but they've played pretty well, really well in Cooper DeJean's case. They're not as weak at linebacker. Their safeties still aren't incredible, but they've got some playmakers there too. So I think they've got some guys there, and they're really well coached. It's just such a different look. I think you have to, like you said, you have to squint a little bit to see it. And what keeps happening here, and a few really smart people have talked about this a little bit, and I thought it was really interesting, is when people are trying to match up the Chiefs in the Super Bowl against the Eagles, they are matching up the Eagles from the last few weeks, or maybe even just the last game. To be fair, the Eagles haven't lost in like months. So, I mean, it's not like they were bad at all. They did have a pretty easy schedule. Just get that out of the way there. They had a relatively easy schedule. They don't. People seem to gauge the Eagles currently versus the Chiefs of all season, and that's a huge mistake to make with the Chiefs, where you have to take them as they are now. The Chiefs offense you're playing now isn't the one that maybe struggled to put up points in some random October game. It's the one that hung 32 on the Bills despite losing a fumble early that was a completely unforced error. Like they're a much different team now than what they are throughout the season. And I think that's one mistake people make there in terms of that. Again, I think there's two good teams, well coached on both sides. I say that more with regards to the coordinators with the Eagles. I'm not a believer in Nick Sirianni. I'm just not. I don't.
Why would you be? Like, I think if you believe in Nick Sirianni, it's like he's like, okay, hold on. I've got it. If you believe in Nick Sirianni, it's because you think he is Dan Campbell's Waluigi, where he is like the evil bad vibes cousin of like this culture. Like Dan Campbell he's not either like head coordinator on either side of the ball, right? And we're gonna see how that goes for him because now his coordinators both left. And Sirianni had this happen after the last Super Bowl,
right?
But Nick Sirianni I'm telling you, Dan Campbell is this positive love, all about the city, us versus everybody kind of in-house vibe that he brings.
Mm-hmm.
Nick Sirianni, I think, probably also has kind of a uniting energy about him that way, but it's bleep everybody else and also bleep you and also bleep me and also bleep everybody on our sideline and in our stands and on their sidelines and in their stands.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that worked. Like, I've seen a lot of Philly fans really like that energy, and it's very different than Andy Reid or Doug Peterson or whatever. So maybe if you want that guy, that's fine. But if Dan Campbell is Luigi out here, I'm gonna give Andy Reid Mario. I think if you're gonna give Dan Campbell credit for the way that he's doing things, I think you have to say Sirianni can lead the way with bad vibes instead of good vibes, but he's got to have his coordinators around him. That's
right.
That's as much credit as I can give him.
Right, and he's got good coordinators. I do like that vibes, that the way that he leads through that ultimate, what is it, like, they don't like us, we don't care. That's like the whole Philly mantra.
They don't like us, we don't care. We don't like us, we don't care. That's what Nick Sirianni's vibe is.
Yeah, and that's
I'll tell you what, dude, he's been in more Super Bowls in the last 3 years than anyone not named Andy Reid. He's been in more Super Bowls in the modern era than anybody not named Andy Reid and Kyle Shanahan.
So he deserves some credit for that.
Yes.
It'll be interesting to see. One big difference, I think, with this Super Bowl versus the last Super Bowl is with the defensive coordinator last Super Bowl, Gannon. Reid was able to hammer on some specific weaknesses, similar to what he just did to the Bills, right? He found a couple things that their defense is not good at. And Andy Reid does this too. Like, he finds the thing your defense isn't ready for, and then he just hits the same button over and over. But not every single play. But it's like, oh, thank God they went away from that because we didn't know how we'd handle that. Okay, we got to get this next play. Oh my gosh, they did it again. And he just waits and waits and waits. It'll be harder to do that with Fangio, who's been around forever. Him and Andy have played a ton of times. Vic Fangio is one reason, and people talk about, like, I think Mahomes is 8-0 against Fangio, but it's not like those have all been like high scoring affairs. His expected points added per play is a little lower against Fangio. Now, some of that also, though, some of those Bronco defenses had a ton of talent. That pass rush aspect is huge. The way Fangio plays, having his guys play a lot of shells, a lot of too high type stuff, a lot of zone, rushing four, rarely blitzing. That can be highly successful against Patrick Mahomes because it takes away the big play. It helps protect the intermediate portion of the field somewhat, although that's where the Eagles have struggled the most, honestly, because that's where they're weakest in coverage. But it allows you to also really rally to the ball and force teams to kill you with death by 1,000 paper cuts. And that's how the Chiefs play, though. The Chiefs are like, oh, you play a game with death by 1,000 paper cuts? I just so happen to have 1,000 tiny knives. Like, that's what they do. They tend to disguise, but they do their thing.
It's so wasteful. You could just use one knife 1,000 times.
I know, but instead, like, the Chiefs have, like, they've got like 100 little ninja stars, and they're like, oh, you thought this was paper cuts? Pew 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 pew. It's like, ow 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 ow. Like, it's an interesting dynamic. It's strength versus strength. And the thing that I'm intrigued by, though, is the way Fangio has had success, though, is if those front four are getting home. Because if they're not, Mahomes will pick you apart. You cannot, if Mahomes has 5 seconds to stand there and survey, he's going to find someone against your zones. And that's one area where like Juju Smith-Schuster, in addition to obviously Travis Kelce, we don't even really talk about that much. Obviously Kelce's a natural zone buster, but like a guy who normally wouldn't be a ton of good for you, like against the Texans in Juju Smith-Schuster, he is able to find gaps in zones. He knows where to go. DeAndre Hopkins, like suddenly these guys that they have that aren't necessarily like man coverage separators might become a lot more important if you are not getting pressure consistently. So that's where a lot's going to be decided up front. And I am curious. I've seen a lot of people think that the Chiefs offensive line is going to be overwhelmed. I've seen people compare it to the Tampa Bay Super Bowl. I guess this defensive line I don't think is as good or as proven as that one. And also, like, Creed Humphrey still exists.
Right.
And Trey Smith still exists. And Jawan Taylor still exists. Like, Jawan Taylor's a better pass protector than Andrew Wiley was. And Andrew Wiley wasn't even playing left tackle, I don't think, that game. Maybe they moved Remmers. I don't even know who they had playing at that point. It's a much better offensive line.
At this point, I've forgotten who was where. I think Remmers was at left tackle and Wiley was it right, I think?
I think so, because they switched him over finally because Remmers had been playing right tackle and was doing okay there, but they were just trying to make it work. I would be surprised if it went that way. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I would be surprised. As a couple of people have pointed out, it's thank you, Ronson Trait in the comments, like whether or not it's maybe not as even as good as the Texans defensive line. Certainly not as strong on the edge. Now, one thing I will say, Josh Sweat versus Joe Thuney freaks me out a little bit because he's a pass rusher with length. I suppose we're going to hit that later. But that's like in terms of like the three-peat vibe check, there are a lot of ways for the Eagles to win this game. I think there's quite a few more for the Chiefs.
Since you caught yourself, I'll save you the trouble on this one. We'll explain, we'll investigate, we'll discuss what that matchup between the offensive line and the defensive line is going to look like in this Super Bowl with Nate Taylor. Not playing offensive line, just back on the show after the break.
Shop Chiefs tickets and more with no fees. Plus, save big with code KCSN at ticketsforless.com, the official ticket provider of KC Sports Network.
While Nate gets settled, Seth, let's start with the top thing in your new piece there on the Chief of the North newsletter. Hello, Nate, live from Radio Row. Let's start with that offensive line while we're here, and then we'll get Nate's wellness checked and figure out how things are going. But we're here. I teased it. We cannot betray the tease now. Maybe the Eagles' defensive line is getting a little bit more credit than you think they deserve. But where are we right now on the Chiefs' offensive line? 2/5 of it is out of position / backup. Obviously, right. 3/5 still the guys who've been there all year. Where are you at on Caliendo and Thuney? And you already took what I thought was maybe the best nugget of all of this. Josh Sweat versus Joe Thuney is a very interesting matchup. Why?
Josh Sweat has like 34.5-inch arms. I think actually a little longer than that. That dude is lengthy. And his way of winning, he is a power-based rusher. And that's the thing that's given Thuney the most trouble. Now, every week, you can almost see Thuney processing and learning and growing with this stuff. And so I think that knowing that it's a guy who wins more with power and isn't necessarily as much of a threat to bend around the edge, because Sweat isn't a huge threat around the edge, but he's a good rusher and he wins with length.
Talk about somebody sweating.
Nate is warm and it is clear. Dude, you look like me in my 8th hour in the sun in Cancun, my friend, except maybe not as happy. So
34.6-inch arms for Josh Sweat from his RAS card.
And Joe Thuney's are more like 32.5 inches. That's why he's a guard.
Crazy, dude.
That length issue, it matters. Now, Thuney played well against the Bills, but they got the ball out fast. And Fangio's defense prides itself, similar to the Chiefs. Remember every time the Texans or the Bills would throw like this quick wide receiver screen and the Chiefs would immediately blow it up? And we're like, why are they doing that? That's what the Eagles pride themselves on too with those short, quick throws. They were one of the best 2 or 3 defenses in the league in that short zone. And so that's where, okay, well, what can you do I understand that you can execute the quick drop back stuff. I understand you can execute the moving pockets, the play action. But when you need to do a 5 or 7 step drop and you need to throw the ball on an obvious passing down, can you hold up? Tooney versus Sweat will be a big thing simply because if Tooney holds his own, we're made in the shade. If he struggles a little bit like he did against Houston's guys, that creates some problems and they'll have to limit the playbook a little more. With Caliendo, one interesting tidbit someone pointed me towards that I didn't realize. Jalen Carter doesn't move around that much. At least he hasn't. Now, maybe Fangio's keeping that in his back pocket. But a lot of the times he lines up as a 3-tech as the left defensive tackle. He doesn't really move around. Like people are like waiting for him to be isolated on Caliendo. I don't know if they're going to do it that way. I think it's going to be a lot more. Caliendo will be matched up against Milton Williams, who's a good player in his own right. And I think Creed's going to be helping him out a fair amount. And then Trey Smith and Jalen Carter are going to have a bloodbath. And Carter has the kind of quickness that spooks me a little bit. Ed Oliver has consistently gotten the best of Trey Smith. Although not this last game. Smith had an excellent game against him in the AFC Championship. But where Smith can struggle occasionally is guys with really great lateral agility. Carter has that, but not as much as Ed Oliver. But he's got more power than Ed Oliver, but that doesn't really matter against Trey Smith. So that, I think, if I'm the Chiefs, what I'm saying is, okay, we're going to see if we can help out Caliendo, and they are going to say, okay, that gives us a one-on-one matchup. And this Super Bowl right here, Trey Smith is already going to break the bank. He could go from, he's probably going to be the highest paid guard in the league no matter how this game goes. He could maybe lose himself a little money if he gets isolated on Carter and gets whooped. But he also could make it not even a question by having a strong game, saying, yeah, they isolated me against Carter, and you know what I did? I threw him on the ground multiple times. That's where I think the game is going to be won and lost primarily, will be those specific matchups. And I'm relatively comfortable with Caliendo having help. I do think if I'm the Eagles, I'm trying to find ways, and this is the thing, Fangio doesn't do a lot of this. I'm threatening the A-gap. I'm mugging a linebacker up there and forcing Humphrey to leave Caliendo alone to see if someone can utilize him as a backpack into the backfield, like what Phillips did to him. So I don't hate the matchup. I don't love it. So much is going to be decided by Tooney and Sweat, and then how they deal with Carter, because Carter's had plenty of quiet games this year. He's getting talked about like he's Chris Jones. and he's not. Maybe he will be.
But he's new, Seth, or newer.
Say that one more time, Seth.
Jalen Carter is being talked about like he is Chris Jones, and he's not. And those are just stats. Like, look up pressures, look up hits. Like, this is just, look up pass rush win percentage, look up double team percentage. Carter is a really good defensive tackle. Chris Jones is a first ballot Hall of Famer. There are two different things there. People talk about Carter thinking about that ceiling. He can take over games, but he doesn't, at least consistently. But that's where the matchups are going to be won in the trenches there. And I really do think for all the different ways the Eagles could win this game, one is if Jalen Hurts, again, has the game of his life on third down like he did in the last Super Bowl. That's a path for them to win. But the other one, and this is where I know the Eagles have a lot of paths to win because they're a good team, but there are very few paths that don't involve them winning that matchup against the Chiefs offensive line. Because if they don't win that matchup, now you're trying to win a shootout against Mahomes in the playoffs with his offensive line playing well, and I don't know that that's happened.
Speaking of somebody who needs to overcome an early deficit versus the entire city of New Orleans, Nate, how's it going? How are you doing there?
Okay, guys. I overestimated, and I'm sadly going to have to underdeliver. Now, look, I'm sure I will attract people once I start really getting going here.
You tend to.
Okay.
Nate, you look like you're melting.
Yeah, I'm really afraid about this is a different kind of cocaine energy. Last year was like, here's Nate, and this year feels like 45 minutes pass, 4 hours pass, 10 hours pass. Here's Nate.
God, there are.
I don't know how long cocaine lasts in your system. Just if that was a question.
I'm looking at athletes right now. I'm looking at media people I admire and respect. And yet, guys, the club ain't really hitting. You know,
Juice isn't
radio,
there.
huh?
The juice isn't there.
No, the juice. I think we just missed it. You know, I think we really missed it because what I could not have anticipated, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll get into my own shenanigans here in a minute, but what I could not anticipate is coming to you from New Orleans after many walks down, you know where. We are still in Central Time, so technically it's 6:30 in the East Coast, and technically everyone who really matters has to get ready for that other thing called the NFL honors. I mean, where they hand out the freaking MVP trophy.
Does that always happen on a Thursday?
Oh, yes, all those other things. Now, because the game's been in the West Coast, you've had more of a buzz, more of a buildup, more of a. I mean, guys, I'm sorry. I don't think Catherine Fitzgerald's coming. Catherine Fitzgerald is not walking through that door. All right. Now, if you don't remember, if you weren't here last year, good friend of the show, covers the Buffalo Bills for the Buffalo News. I gave her the microphone because I was so on a high narcotically of Carrot Top.
Yes, Carrot Top was there.
Certain people of a certain gender, and then, you know, getting mad love, mad respect in the streets. You know, like last year, Bomani Jones dapped me up before I came and sat down and talked to you all. Okay, and sometimes that stuff matters. You know, ain't nobody in this beat, man. Ain't a soul. Ain't a god. Where's Martha? She ain't here either.
I'll tell you what, man. I thought there was like a 10% chance we were going to get Martha Stewart on the show
really
today.
thought so too.
Just like a brief cameo. Just hand her the microphone, go full screen.
Yeah.
To be here.
Mr. Brocktober is correct. Vegas will be hard to top. I thought New Orleans had a better shot. Problem is, we're in Central Time, playing on East Coast time with an NFL honors thing. Like I started seeing people leave Radio Row and then look entirely different. I don't want to see Tom Pelissero in a tux, but I just saw it and I know where he's going. So I'm
really sorry to cut in because we talked about the NFL rewards.
No.
Or awards. Did I see correctly that Chris Jones wasn't even a finalist for Defensive Player of the Year?
Correct.
I don't believe he was. Yeah, no.
No, he wasn't.
Okay, please get.
Look,
I
Steph,
saw that when I was in Cancun, and I got irate.
We don't watch
in the middle of the Caribbean.
Steph.
Do you have any idea how mad you have to be on a ferry where a dude is playing Somewhere Over the Rainbow beautifully on a guitar and singing along to it in the middle of the bluest water you've ever seen, and you're sitting there irate? Do you have any idea how hard that is to accomplish?
What are you gonna? Who are you gonna take off this list?
Don't
Trey
come over
Hendrickson?
Here, you will be on camera. Get out of here. I mean, if you want to come over here, do your thing. Okay, here he comes, kids.
Who are we getting?
Hi,
is this Martha Stewart?
No, it's not Martha Stewart. It's not.
Well, I don't want to talk to this guy.
I'm gonna unbutton some things, really get some heat going,
and then try. Yeah, you think Martha's gonna show up?
This is my podcast. Yes. Hello. Say hi. Say hi to Sam. Hi. Sam from the Washington Post.
Will you please tell him
Sam.
We would really
your prediction, sir. Your prediction. Will you have a grenade or a tornado tonight?
Ooh, I'm gonna have to go a grenade. I don't know what either of those things are.
Perfect.
But I feel like I need to learn. I have one anecdote that I think Chiefs fans might appreciate.
Please give it to me. Give it to me.
I already know this, but
nope.
So I wrote a story about Patrick Mahomes in 2016.
Great.
When he was a junior at Texas Tech. Yes. And I was doing it for The Ringer, and I was like calling a bunch of people. I called them on the phone. I talked to Cliff, a bunch of people. And my favorite person that I talked to was LaTroy Hawkins.
Yes.
Godfather.
Yes.
And I swear to God, it's maybe the best like non-interview I've ever done, because I called him, he did not answer, and his voicemail was just, "This is LaTroy's phone. If you're calling about money, hang up."
Get out of here. Incredible. Get out of here.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I've unbuttoned my shirt and things have popped off. Okay. Now look.
Mostly the buttons.
Now look, there's I think this thing was jumping at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. And I was too busy transcribing and trying to do yet another story for The Athletic because, I'm up. Look, guys, I'm emptying buttons. Andy unzips, Spags flashes, as Seth says. I unbutton my shirt, and this is all I got. These are the stories I have for your Super Bowl week. All of them are coming, okay? Every single one of them's getting right in your neck, all right? Do you want what Nico Remigio's going through? Here it is, okay? Now look. This place was jumping. I saw Sarah Spain. Shout out to you, ma'am. I'm gonna just name a bunch of media people. Ed Warder. Fuck, I love Ed Warder, man.
Whoa!
Incredible.
Seth's here. You can't cuss in front. Seth, I'm sorry about Nate.
Love Ed Warder. I just
Don Van Natta there at any point?
I haven't seen him. I wonder what he's up to. I did see the McCourty brothers. Shout out to them. God, they look so good. I'm like, don't you guys want to still play football? God, it's amazing seeing former NFL athletes and be like, so you're telling me you're out of the league?
Nate's undoing another button for our audio listeners. We are nearing Nate's navel.
Oh,
Navel Taylor.
And then you see Myles Garrett. I saw Myles Garrett yesterday.
This is so Nate. Nate, you froze. Nate, you froze.
I froze perfectly. Is that what you're saying?
In a beautiful position. I will say, in Nate's defense, for those who are watching live or listening, Nate's buttons are now down so far. Someone please screenshot how he looks right now. So Nate's buttons are down so
the
far.
Internet is telling me to not take my shirt off. That's why that all of a sudden the Zoom, the Wi-Fi said, whoa, what you doing now? What you doing?
Yeah.
We cannot show nipples. Do you know where you are?
I can just say I learned in Cancun this week because I finally purchased some nice button-up shirts for purposes of vacationing. They're kind of festive. Josh has actually you guys I think have seen me in them a few times when I was like doing like a Florida thing or whatever.
I give you very serious fashion advice that you
I dropped a couple buttons. And so I did learn when I put on a t-shirt my last day in Cancun, those buttons really do let you breathe a little bit because a t-shirt, I was dying. So Nate, I understand if you just got to take it off.
How many coffees I done had this today? You know how many coffees I done had? How many Gatorades? How many? I walked so many blocks to get this. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that.
Preservation Hall Jazz Band.
Vinyl there. That's sweet.
record vinyl, kids. This is what the game's for. Okay, now I can take my shirt off and put on another shirt. I don't know if the audience wants to do that. See that? I don't know if I don't know if Tom wants to see that over there. So look, it's a great city.
Oh God, you had 8 a.m.
smells
media
incredible
today?
Yeah, it smells incredible. And when I say it smells incredible, it smells like weed, more seafood, weed, more seafood,
and sweat,
and piss,
and a little bit of weed,
and piss. It's great.
Jeepers.
Seth, you ever get FOMO not being on Radio Row?
No, I don't think Radio Row has a ton to offer me.
I don't think so either.
I'm perfectly content with my podcast couch. I'm pretty content with it.
Well, with Nate's wellness, at least somewhat, I don't want to say verified, but with Nate's wellness documented, let's take the next thing up on Chiefs offense versus Eagles defense here. Seth, I'll let you pick one of your things. Nate and I have done a little bit of kind of both sides of the ball stuff over the last couple of days. So while Nate looks around for Carrot Top, what's the next thing up for you in terms of one of those sort of offensive keys that you wrote about in the Chiefs of the North newsletter that people can go read if they want to read all of them?
Yeah, they sure can. One thing that actually kind of circulates around multiple points that I had. I talked about RPOs. I talked about playoff Trav. I talked about needing production out of Hollywood, Hopkins, or Juju. Doesn't matter which one. But you need production out of one of them. I assume Xavier Worthy's going to have production. We've reached that point with him. He's averaging about 60 yards a game since like midseason. He's really involved. But Hollywood would be my favorite one to pick because the Eagles have struggled a little bit on the intermediate level of the field, and that's where Hollywood eats. But because the Eagles play so much zone, that's kind of the larger 10,000 feet in the air that involves all of these things. That involves Travis Kelce, that involves needing Hopkins or Juju to get going. It involves RPOs. I guess let's just go with RPOs. We talked about it last week before I just shamelessly left on vacation, that the Chiefs' opening script against the Bills featured multiple RPOs after not seeing them do a ton of that this year. And part of that was the Bills came out playing a fair amount of zone. And then anytime they shifted to man, Reed had some kind of rub route for him that was just mean-spirited. I don't know what tells he found, but man, they knew what they were running. I mean, it was rough. But I am curious if the Eagles are looking to maintain their defensive identity, and generally Fangio does. Not all the time, but most of the time. And they do a lot of rushing for, playing a lot of zone at all three levels. RPOs are an obvious way to try to take advantage of zone looks because they're watching the ball. Yep. And no matter how disciplined your defense is, no matter how disciplined your linebackers are, they are going to move a little. And seeing the Chiefs run them and run them effectively early against the Bills, and then they kind of went away from it to an extent because it looked like at the first drive, I was like, oh man, Hollywood's getting 10 targets this game on slants. And I think it might have worked, honestly, but they had other stuff they wanted to dial up. That's going to be a huge one to see what are the zone busters, because against the Bills and against the Texans as well, what are the man coverage busters? This is what are the zone busters going to be? What are they going to try to do to get those open zones? I mean, with the Eagles running a fair amount of cover two stuff, are we going to see a lot of honey hole shots, where you're trying to hit over the top of that boundary corner and underneath that safety? Because if that's the case, hello, Hollywood Brown and Justin Watson.
Yeah, baby.
I'm dead serious.
Yeah,
I'm dead
baby.
serious.
Yeah.
I mean, and Xavier Worthy has gotten a lot more comfortable with those routes. That could also be a place you see DeAndre Hopkins a ton. There's so many different ways with the guys they have they could do zone buster stuff. That is kind of the overarching thing with everything. That's where with playoff Trav, with the guys not named Xavier Worthy, all of that comes down to how will they punish the Eagles for trying to maintain their identity.
I'm going to spin off that. Let's unless you have the answer to it, which I'd love to know. I don't. There's so many different ways. RPOs are one. Leaning really heavily on Hopkins and Juju is another one. Travis Kelce's kind of the ultimate zone buster. Because what kind of zones are they playing? Are they playing kind of your normal stuff? Or are they playing the anyone but Travis Kelce, Buffalo Bills style game? Mm-hmm. And that's going to matter a great deal. And if it's the latter, if it's the former, then Kelce's getting 15 targets. And how he does with those will determine how the game goes. Because the Chiefs are perfectly happy moving the ball 5 to 7 yards at a time to Travis Kelce. They're perfectly happy with it. It's like, yeah, sure, we'll throw it to him again, then again. Start defending him. Who will step up when they inevitably start to collapse on Kelce? So there's a few different ways they can hurt it, but how and how they're going to adjust to Fangio's adjustments, that's going to be the overarching theme of the Chiefs offense against the Eagles defense. And Nate, we didn't necessarily go as far down this rabbit hole the last couple of shows, and Seth wrote a little more about it. But when you do look at kind of that secondary group of pass catchers, which I think we've kind of figured out, Travis Kelce still 1-1. Xavier Worthy has been rising up that list. But with there being a little bit of from the way we were talking about him, and Seth wrote about this again, but like a little bit of an underwhelming couple of games for Hollywood Brown, just in terms of how he was used and how often he actually got targeted. Hollywood, Hopkins, Juju, Nate, when you look at kind of, again, that second tier of pass catchers, do you think one particular guy presents a matchup problem for Philly or presents a particular answer for the Chiefs? Who do you like in that group to have kind of the next biggest day?
Considering we're on a faster track, not in freezing temperatures, in a dome, it should be Hollywood Brown.
Yes.
It could also be a little sprinkle of Juju Smith-Schuster. who's been in the system the longest out of all the guys you mentioned. He's as healthy as you could ask of him right now, which he might be. Unfortunately, he might be the healthier player than DeAndre Hopkins at this point.
Yep.
It was still not appeared on an injury report throughout this stretch, right?
What? I didn't hear that. That doesn't matter.
No, you should
get out of here.
But no one else should.
No, he's fine. He's totally fine. But
if he weren't
totally fine,
if he weren't fine, 2 weeks of rest might be kind of nice for him at this point, and playing in warmer weather. If he weren't fine.
Mahomes is still on the injury report with an ankle injury. DeAndre Hopkins has not appeared.
So he's fine.
Yeah, just hey, you guys gamble away. Gamble to your heart's content. I'm gonna do some gambling tonight, not with my finances, but with my soul. Okay,
my soul.
So, look, I think it's probably Hollywood Brown. The Chiefs need to use similar. I remember Patrick telling me and some other reporters in Kansas City this, like, even though they didn't score a touchdown in the first half against the 49ers, he still felt, again, the most insane throw of the entire game from either quarterback last year between him and Brock Purdy. Him on, I think it was play action, him angling to the left, throwing, 60 yards in the air on a rope to McCole Hardman. Most people forget that play because, unfortunately, Isaiah Pacheco fumbled on the next play. But the fact that he threw that ball and that they completed it put some fear. I will throw it over your head to the 49ers. And they need to have a very similar type play that results in touchdowns or results in points, I think, early in Sunday's game. Just so that the Eagles know we've taken some of your aggressiveness with some of the zone coverages you might bring. And if we can beat you down the field just in a flat-on race, you sure you want to blitz? You sure you want to do that? So if that happens, and let's say Hollywood Brown has 2 catches, 65 yards, but one of them was like a 45-yard completion, he will have done his job because it creates enough space and enough of a threat for everybody else to operate in the intermediate area of the field. And you maybe take that safety out of the equation when it's 3rd and 5, Yep. So I think that's an important distinction, and that's why I would say Hollywood, again, as fresh of a legs as you could have. His legs,
and he looks explosive. He looks explosive. He looks fast. It's been puzzling to me with his usage down the stretch versus his usage the last 2 weeks.
Yes, and I know we got a question here from Martine. How fast are 2 rookie corners? We about to find out because I would test it early. Like, hey, Cooper DeJean, I done said so many glowing things about you. You
we can't be that fast.
You proved me wrong, baby. You proved me right, and you proved them wrong. I'm sorry, I'm in my head. You proved me right, baby. I believed from day 0. Okay, I looked at you in your face. Now, Cooper DeJean's not in front of me, but I looked in your face. I looked in your eyes, and I heard you say, "I'll do whatever the coach said." And I said, "Bleep that! You're a corner, man. Say it. You're in Indianapolis, and say it with your chest." You know what? He a good corner. Now he can't play third safety if you need to. But let's find out. Let's see if you can keep up on the race. Just 9 route them to death. Maybe give one move, and let's see if you can throw it over the top of their head.
I would just want to add to that. That would be the funniest result. Would be a one-off game plan that is back to, and you know what? Only Weird Games listeners might not remember 9 routes, coach. 9 routes. That
Give me another 9.
It's just 9. nothing but Justin Watson isolated against Cooper DeJean. That's my Super Bowl.
To determine who is the king of the white football players.
Oh, I didn't even think about that, Seth.
Yeah, you're whatever.
Oh, you meant I'm sorry. I thought you meant Super Bowl.
I hadn't noticed. I guess I just don't notice things like that.
Seth, racism's been ended. I don't know if you saw, but end racism will not be at the back of the end zones anymore. Cooper
Well, thank
DeJean
God we
and
can
Justin
check that off
Watson.
the list.
I know.
I mean, honestly, it's been a minute. Like, about freaking time. We did it. All right. Good
I
job,
would have
team.
thought it would have been bigger news, but
You would think that it doesn't. You would think the fact that we finally defeated racism would have been bigger news. But, the Super
Lord,
Bowl
take
is
me
on.
now. Lord,
More
take
There's
like-
a lot going on.
Take me.
Guys,
So-
more
Send me to the
uh,
heavens. I've seen
like-
it. I've heard it all.
more like Cooper DEI gene, huh?
You know, this is one of the nicest breathable dress shirts that I have, and I'm telling you guys, if I was coming off the bench in 1993 for the Chicago Bulls, the buttons couldn't last on me, dog.
So
Nate might rip his shirt off. There's a chance that's how this show ends today.
I think Nate's absolutely right.
Martine, I know Cooper DeJean's a 4.43. That's why I looked him in his face and said, "Hey, bro, stop lying to them boys. You a corner."
Yeah, stop saying you're a safety. I understand that you are a bit of a
give me the
unicorn.
ball on punt returns. You see how I carried Iowa's defense, offense, and special teams? But Cooper, you didn't play offense. I did play offense on punt return.
So, just an interesting side note to all this. Vic Fangio's defenses are built around we don't give up big plays. We make you do, 15-yard play drives. And again, like Nate, you missed it earlier that we talked about. The Chiefs are like, sweet, that's what we do. We were going to do that anyway. It's like, that, which is great. That's what they do. But one big play is enough when you've got a defensive coordinator like Fangio who hates giving up big plays. If he does have some special stuff for KC, one big play might be enough to force him to go back to the norm. Oh, another thing that I just have to mention, I've said RPOs. I just want to add in this, and I know we got to talk about Chiefs defense versus their offense, but Kareem Hunt, run the ball efficiently, do it just enough. There's not a team in the league that has the discipline to get run on for 5 yards a pop over and over and not change up. There's not a team that exists that'll do it. And the Eagles are a good team. They're tough. But if they want to insist on these two deep safety shell type stuff, let's let Kareem Hunt just, okay. And then over and over. So those are the things that you can do. I'm excited to see what happens with that. But I do think this game will largely be determined on that side, on that matchup, Chiefs offense versus Eagles defense.
I love that Sean says, what D coordinator likes giving up big plays? His name is Steve Spagnuolo. Okay.
There's a lot of,
so he'll give up one big play for two defensive big plays.
Exactly.
He'll give up 3 for 5. Let's roulette this bad boy.
Yeah, there's an entire grouping of defensive philosophies, Spags included, a lot of disciples of Jimmy Johnson, Andy Reid's old defensive coordinator. They are willing to risk giving up a big play by being aggressive and blitzing. Like the think of the Ryan brothers, that sort of thing. Those are the guys that they don't like big plays, of course, but they don't formulate their game plans around avoiding them. Fangio, his blueprint is all over the league right now because after Mahomes took it over, and about 2020-ish, people were like, we got to do something different. And what that different thing became is shells. Doesn't matter if it's too high. Doesn't matter if it's cover 3 quarters, shells. Your safeties are 20 yards off the line of scrimmage. And, Greg Johnson finally was vindicated for what he did for years and years. But it's part of his DNA is he hates giving up big plays more so than he tries to force big plays by the defense. I hope that kind of answers that question.
So I'm not going to try to rush us out of here as we do approach the hour mark. We've got an entire fireside chat that I believe Nate will also be kind of the outro, right? We're going to make that the final send off. So we'll get to that in a second. I want to do our predictions. And you mentioned, Seth, we haven't really talked about the Chiefs defense versus the Eagles offense. Nate and I talked about it. So you can consider this a very long prediction window if we want it to be. So again, we don't need to get this thing wrapped up under 60. It's the Super Bowl. It's okay. I've got a little bit of time, but I do want to get the predictions, and I want to get something a Chiefs defensive key or an Eagles offensive key for that matter that's kind of sitting with you. Nate, you and I have gone first. Let's give Seth the longest time to percolate. I want your Chiefs defense, Eagles offensive key, and your score prediction.
So
your name's not Nate.
Oh,
we're
going to give you the longest to percolate.
We're going to give you last. Yeah.
That's on me. That's my bad.
you hit third in this order, you're going to bring us home. That's a baseball analogy.
So,
That ball is round.
and
And
not
it's honestly not that silly of a sport.
Not silly. Yeah, that thing will hurt you. So here's what I'll say. Boys, I know that this game is very complex, but it's also very simple. And that's why it's utterly addictive. It's time in front of the world, once again, to let Leo Chenal. I mean, it's all led up to this, because Leo Chenal, and I know you remember this, Seth, very well. The first time that Leo Chenal popped off on tape was this game exactly 2 years ago.
Yep. That was
and he's only
was his coming out party. Yep.
That was it, kids. It was like he and the coaching staff figured it out in real time for the mother bleeping Super Bowl. Okay, so the game is about blocking and tackling. Time to see Leo Chenal blow up some blocks and make some tackles.
Love it.
What's the score,
Leo.
Nate?
Oh yeah, Nate, give a prediction.
What's the score?
Oh, I'm supposed to put this in the athletic. 27-24.
Very close to what I have written down.
Boom.
Nate's taking the Eagles.
Come on. This is part of the fireside chat. But
okay.
Okay. You know what? Nate, you have full reign to save anything to the fireside chat. You'll get the actual send off.
Yep.
I'll tell you, Seth. I got 30-24 Chiefs. I think that this ends up being giving up 24 points in the Super Bowl should never cost you the game, and it should never be viewed as an ultimate negative. I'll take the two easy answers so Seth can pick a nice heady one. Trent McDuffie, Chris Jones, you have a chance to win the Super Bowl. You have a chance to be two of the key members of this three-peat because we have seen Jalen Hurts have a very, very, very good Super Bowl. This group of offensive weaponry for Philadelphia is remarkable. They have, I would say, probably, again, like maybe the third duo of wide receivers in the NFL, certainly one of the top, and the best running back season that we've seen in a very, very, very long time out of Saquon Barkley. The offensive line is good, not perfect, banged up for what it's worth, and Jalen Hurts is good, not perfect. Chris Jones could fundamentally change the face of this game.
Yep.
And if he doesn't, Charles Omenihu, welcome to the Super Bowl. He didn't get to play in this game last year. We've seen the clip of him being emotional on the sideline after the AFC Championship game, just screaming like a child, I get to play in the Super Bowl. I mean that as a compliment for what it's worth. With the childlike wonder that we would all hope to have, knowing I get to play in a Super Bowl after he got so close and did everything you could have asked him to do last year. If it's Omenihu, if it's Karlaftis, if it's Tershawn Wharton, if it's Mike Dana, someone has to keep Jalen Hurts uncomfortable, and the Eagles would be fools to let Chris Jones be the guy who does that. And then Jalen Watson and Trent McDuffie, you have fabulous receivers across from you that I think they match up with kind of interestingly that we haven't gotten super deep in the weeds on. I know Saquon is where everybody is starting. I will take a good Saquon game sight unseen. I would not accept a great Saquon game, and I would not want a great Eagles passing performance. But if the best thing the Eagles have is 125 yards and a touchdown out of Saquon Barkley, I think the Chiefs win this football game. If he does that on 12 carries, it's an extreme problem. So that's not incredibly off the beaten path, I suppose. But your stars have to play like stars in the Super Bowl. I've got 30-24 Chiefs.
Both of what you guys said are ones that I would have picked. I think it says something about how the Eagles offense has functioned this year that everything's starting with their running back, especially when you have two excellent receivers. AJ Brown is an alpha. He is a top 5 or 6 receiver in this league. And Devontae Smith is arguably the best number 2 wide receiver in the league. He's right up there with the T. Higgins of the world. And then Dallas Goedert is an excellent tight end. He hurt the Chiefs a ton in the last Super Bowl, made some incredible catches. And the fact that they don't have a great passing game with those guys and that offensive line and the threat of Saquon is an indictment on Jalen Hurts. And I don't mean that in like a mean way or anything like that, but the reality is you take that ecosystem that he has and you plunk a high-level quarterback into that, and they're going off. This Eagles offense has struggled, and it's kind of leaned on Saquon. Now, he had a better game, Hurts did, against the Commanders, did some good stuff, but again, they kept giving him the ball. That's really helpful. I would say something you hit on, Josh, keeping Hurts uncomfortable. He is one of the things that differentiates him from the elite guys because he can make all the throws. He can make incredible plays. We saw it in the last Super Bowl where he played his absolute best game of his career. Was lights out. Unbelievable. Wasn't quite enough. When he's pressured, he's not the same guy. It's telling that when you hear people talk about Hurts being pressured, what the hope is, what analysts say is, well, hopefully he can learn to just throw it away. It's not that he can create a play. It's that he won't take a back-breaking sack. It's just a different thing. So pressure on Hurts is huge. Again, whoever it comes from. So I'm piggybacking on that. Leo Chanel, piggybacking on that. I will add to that the edges. This could be Spags crowning I told you all I was right about how edges should be built and how they should play moment. Because, some of it came in the Super Bowl last year and the Super Bowl the year before that, where the Eagles and the Niners ran the ball decently, but not incredibly, because Spags is going to Spags. And one of those things that means is if you weigh under 250 pounds, get off my edge. You don't belong here. You don't fit in with these guys. My edges weigh 260. They got long arms and they can take tackles on one-on-one. The Eagles offensive line is huge. They're good run blockers. They are not used to playing a team that can eat some of those blocks. Can Mike Dana, George Karlaftis, and Charles Omenihu do that? If they do, and Leo Chanel is doing his thing as well, that gives the Chiefs a huge advantage because one reason Saquon breaks off these big runs, everyone says, oh, you're playing a great running back, load the box. Here's the problem with that. You load the box and one dude misses, that's where you get like a 50 to 60 yard touchdown. If the Chiefs are able to, by and large, keep Saquon to, a 6-yard gain, a 5-yard gain, up a 0-yard gain, that kind of stuff, then that you can do that all day. And if you can do that without stacking the box, it changes everything. So I would add the edges to that, pressure on Hurts, and avoid the giant chunk plays. That's the only thing that kept the Eagles in that game last year was Hurts played the absolute game, or not last year, 2 years ago. Hurts played the game of his life. And it wasn't enough against Patrick Mahomes. If he does that again, and he hits on these 3rd and longs, that kind of stuff, that's going to be very, very difficult for the Chiefs to overcome. So I think building on everything you guys said, plus the Spags edge prototype, this is the game if it's going to matter because we don't have to stack the box to stop the run in theory. Big Mike Pennell, this is why you got brought back here. This is your game. Big Mike and big edges.
What's the score?
Chiefs 31, Eagles 20. I have thoroughly convinced myself that the Chiefs match up decently against this Eagles team and that their playoff run has prepared them well for this moment.
All right, fellas. We got a 3rd Super Bowl in 3 years just around the corner.
Look at us.
It is truly, truly a remarkable thing. And however many buttons are going to be up, down, or wherever, Nate Taylor, from here on out, sir, you can send us straight into Super Bowl 59.
As always, thanks. Hopefully you enjoyed my provocative chest when there was no provocativeness in this Radio Row warehouse. First thing I want to do is give a nice shout out because I met this man today at the Chiefs Hotel. So he's living the good life. Pastor Gilbert. I met Pastor Gilbert and his family earlier today. We took a photo. It was very lovely. Loves watching us on YouTube. I don't know if he's watching us right now from however many miles of proximity in New Orleans, but I do want to say thank you to Pastor Gilbert. And I want to say thank you guys for coming along for this odyssey, an odyssey that's never been done before in the Super Bowl era. That's something that I've got to get more used to saying. I know the Super Bowl's, I know the NFL is 105 years, but the Super Bowl is, as y'all know, 59 years, essentially 60. Yes, I know that the Green Bay Packers at one point in time three-peated. How many black people were on the field, y'all?
It's a very good question.
I'm just look. I gotta ask. Shout out to Vince Lombardi, hell of a coach. Just gotta ask, how many people of color were on the field? So now that
congratulations on winning the championship of a 12-team league.
No, hey, listen, we talked up
Thank
Cooper
you. See,
DeJean
that's
versus Justin Watson,
I
guys.
also
let's not be two-faced here.
I also wanted to say that the league was obviously a lot more condensed, but that means the talent level just had to be over the top. Where the black people at? So
I also don't think they had a Cooper DeJean back then. I don't think any of them were putting down a 4.240. Whatever he was.
4.240. So look, I am going to try to translate this the same way that I did on the franchise, and I don't always like using similar anecdotes and analogies, but this is fitting. This is it, guys. The team that you root for, that has Patrick Mahomes, is in yet another Super Bowl. The team you root for, that has Andy Reid, has a chance to do something that has never been done in the modern NFL. The team you root for, that has Chris Jones, is 60 minutes away from separating themselves from everyone else in the history of the sport, because it was a 12-team league. The team you root for has Travis Kelce, who may or may not have only 60 minutes guaranteed left. And maybe 60 plus, because, the game could go to overtime, as we saw last year. The team you root for, and I wrote this today, has a draft class that has never lost a playoff game. The 2022 draft class is 9-0. Trent McDuffie never lost. George Karlaftis never lost. Isaiah Pacheco never lost. Leo Chanel never lost. Okay, Brian Cook never ever lost. With this game, this is a signifier of the destination and the finish line. The destination is not the finish line. These are two different things. As someone who used to run in a competitive manner at a far lower level than this, I always remember how the destination is not the finish line. You want the valor, the respect, and honestly, you want to be remembered as someone who crossed the finish line. It's the only reason why you race. That is the purest version of racing. And what the Chiefs have been doing for the last 3 years is continuing to race everybody, knowing everybody's chasing them. In particular, the last 2 years, especially this year. The Eagles are running 400-yard dash. Feels great in the first 100 meters. Gets a little uncomfortable in the second 100 meters. You go around the turn, okay. I can see the finish line. Guys, the Chiefs have been running a marathon. In a sprint, in a 400, to another marathon. And if you watch the Olympics, there's no greater feeling knowing that you're getting closer and closer to the finish line than when they ring that bell. When it goes ding, 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 ding. In high school track, they used to shoot into the air. Why are we shooting in the air? What does this promote? Gun violence? What? I just want to run a race. So you shoot the gun to start the race. Then when we get to the last lap, you shoot it again? What am I supposed to do? Anyway, when they ring the bell, now it's on. Everybody knows each step is one step closer to the finish line. The destination is getting there first. These are two different things. You're going to cross the finish line. Everybody in the NFL has crossed the finish line this year. One team will get to the destination, and one team will get to, as you know, Mitch Holthus calls it, the summit. As I've described it, the burden. Two things are going to happen. The Eagles will feel the weight of the moment historically in their legs. Because if you win on Sunday, the Eagles will be known as Super Bowl champions. Mm-hmm. It's an incredible distinction. An amazing achievement. And the Chiefs, who are rested, who are the healthier team, like I told you the last game, their legs are heavy because of the burden. But you know what makes those legs feel a little less heavy? When you go through that final turn and you see the straightaway and the crowd gives you something. We don't know when another team's going to have this particular race. And they see both the finish line and the destination. Either the Chiefs will see those two things and will sprint very similar to the way they sprinted towards the 1 seed on Christmas Day under disadvantages in Pittsburgh. Or the legs are so heavy. You've been running for so long. Somebody actually might catch you. Because those legs are not your legs. And so I just want people to understand that the burden ends on Sunday night. It's over. You placed history upon your shoulders and upon your legs. And it will be over on Sunday night. But getting to the finish line is not the same as getting to the destination. And if the Chiefs get to the destination, maybe if the opportunity presents itself, I will see that mother bleeping bird mascot and beat the living daylights out of him like my name is Ace Ventura.
You earned it, Nate. Go ahead.